It's like seeing better days.
Yes. Started tearing it down. But right, but then they're like really taking much time.
That's a good oh, the hell. That's fine. What's happening? Josh for a while.
Finally got one of my cats that was going to do that secret to work string meeting. Oh,
yeah.
Ceiling there. I hate it going for so long.
Okay, that's all right.
We go down to Manchester and get an hour.
I think so. I think they're gonna be
Yes, it was the Canada.
Oh, then I guess they're here.
Stuff, but it goes.
Yes,
See,
yes.
the rain was so heavy in spot conditions, so it really shuts off. Shuts off the.
Hello, I see you guys up front. Oh, I have my, I'll just sat down meeting. I just sat over sit, so then I just don't have to. So, you guys enjoy visiting.
So for her, it's
Morning, Rich.
1990. Right. Well, not you. We went to O's, but just Michelle was Jamaican. Twice.
We have not been back to Togo, just that one time.
Morning, John. How are you doing? We're on the search for a grandson.
Yeah, he's got them all over his shirt.
Yeah, Stephen. Stephen. Lives here in Dayton. For heights.
Yeah, yeah, he would have been, what, 5 at the time when we were in Togo. I'm the oldest, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I know, we look like we're brothers, or I actually, because he was a doctor, I get called doctor all the time in town. I'm his son, people confuse me. Yeah, my dad's going to their house for lunch. Well, we will be today, yeah, that's the plan today. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to be getting started here in just a moment, so if you can find your seats and we'll all gather in. I'll just give you a minute here and make sure that everyone that's coming down from upstairs is down. So we'll be starting in just about a minute. All right, well, we're going to get started. We're happy to have John Morgan with us today. John and I have an Ohio connection, so that's always fun for me. Appreciate that. But we're happy to have him here. He's going to be sharing with us in Sunday school and then also during our church service. So looking forward to that. So, John. Oops. The handheld, probably you should go with your, unless you want this one. Yeah, you could just turn that on and you should be okay. Tom, is he okay on the wireless? Yeah, okay.
It's working? Okay. That's me, I guess, my name up there. And, it's been a little while since I've been here. I should say since we were here. I think most of you know that Michelle died July of last year from, and so I wanted to just take this time this morning to talk about walking with God through pain and suffering. And this isn't about, me, it's about us. And I'm going to read this because if I don't read it, I won't get through it. And what I'd like to do is just take a little time at the end of this just to open us up to talk, okay? And that'll make sense as I go through this. Michelle and I walked through a time of affliction and loss. Now, this isn't just about Michelle and me, it's about all of us. Pain and loss are universal experiences. Everyone is carrying a cross of some sort. The cross that Christ followers bear is often defined as suffering for the sake of the gospel. This is true, but it's more than that. Your cross is whatever keeps you from denying yourself and following Christ. Perhaps it's abuse of some sort, failure, rejection, loss. Some crosses are heavier to bear than others, but they are all hard to bear. There is a warfare taking place between God and the devil for the allegiance of the human heart, for the allegiance of each one of us. Who are we going to follow? Who are we going to trust? This is what was happening in the life of Job. At stake in this cosmic battle was Job's allegiance. The same is happening in our lives today. I want to share with you the cross that Michelle and I bore, and one to some degree I'm still bearing. I'm not telling you this story for my benefit. This room is filled with a lot of collective pain. Often this pain is hidden. It's my desire that something I say will speak into your experience. Michelle and I served as missionaries, and I'm continuing to serve as missionary with ABWE International. Michelle served as the international director. I got to flip my clicker here somewhere. Did I manage to lose? Here we go. Okay. Michelle served as the international director of healthcare. Bump. Okay. And Gary and Cindy went on 2 trips. Well, they came out to Togo after Africa and brought out their whole family. When was that? What year was that? 1990? Okay. And so then they went with Michelle on 2 medical trips to Jamaica. I was with them on that as well. Michelle served as international director. As a doctor of nursing practice, she saw and treated her own patients. She recruited medical professionals like Gary to travel with her to majority world countries to provide health care for underserved communities. She led 31 of these teams to 16 different countries over an 18-year period. She led medical teams on disaster relief after earthquakes in Haiti, Ecuador, and Nepal. She led teams to work with displaced refugees in the slums in Cairo, Egypt, and she was there 8 times, and the conflict region of eastern Ukraine. So I went on some of these with her, but I had a lot of different responsibilities to her. And when she was going to Ukraine, to the conflict region, I said, okay, well, you're not going there by yourself. So I went on both of those trips with her. These evangelistic medical clinics were held in local churches as an outreach to the communities. She established relationships with national pastors in Argentina, Chile, Jamaica, Egypt, and other countries, and returned to these sites repeatedly with medical teams. Every patient that came to these clinics was given a personal presentation of the gospel and received medical treatment. The Lord used her in a unique and profound way. She was in Argentina on a medical mission, and I called to speak with the missionary with whom she was working. And I asked him, how are the clinics going? And he said, wonderful. And I asked him, okay, that's what everybody says about short-term trips, right? And I said, okay, well, tell me, what's so wonderful about these, what's happening down there? And he said, people are coming to faith at these clinics, and the churches are growing. So it's interesting. You look at a lot of these reports on short-term missions, and they give you the number for how many people accepted Christ. You know, it was 150 or so, but the real proof is in whether or not the churches are growing, not whether or not somebody prayed a prayer. People, he said, people are coming to faith in these clinics, and the churches are growing. The churches where Michelle held clinics last year, this is what he's saying to me, have grown as a direct result of this ministry. When she was in Cairo, the team leader came to me and said, what are you doing? We don't normally see Muslims coming to faith in Christ like this. During the course of her ministry itinerary, she began to develop symptoms that seemed to be consistent with anxiety or burnout. This seemed logical since she was working full-time as a primary medical provider in a large long-term medical care facility where she had oversight of 120 patients. At the same time, she was leading 3 to 4 international medical clinics per year, working on a doctorate and traveling with me to raise support for our ministries. And so we thought, okay, this has got to be burnout. She was just showing some initial symptoms. In August of 2018, our missionary support reached the point where she could resign from her job at the extended care facility. We thought that her symptoms would begin to subside once this stressful job was no longer her responsibility. So she was working there, and they had a physician who was working there, but he had a full-time practice, and so this was just something he was doing on the side. So the nurses would call him up because he had all the call, and he'd yell at the nurses, and so they get scared. And so Michelle just said, "Look, just call me." And so she was taking all the call. So her symptoms after she quit that job didn't subside, but seemed to increase. She was diagnosed with anxiety and prescribed medication. So she was misdiagnosed several times, and she received counseling and attended burnout clinics, and we read voluminously on stress and burnout. None of these made any difference. We went to a clinic for a 3 weeks clinic in Michigan for missionaries. They were experiencing burnout and so forth, and they had group sessions, they had lectures, they had private counseling, and so this was 3 weeks of this. And they had a great facility. They put you in an apartment, and at the end of the 3 weeks, I said, "Wow, that was great. I benefited from that." And we were there for Michelle, and Michelle said, "That didn't help me at all." I thought, well, great, it was kind of strange. Realizing that this condition was worse than what had been diagnosed, we traveled to the Cleveland Clinic for a cranial MRI in April 11th, 2022. The imaging revealed that Michelle had FTD, frontal temporal disorder. It's the same disease that Bruce Willis has. I don't know if any of you know who Bruce Willis is. This is a rare degenerative neurological disease of the brain for which there is no known cause or cure. Michelle resigned from her role as the International Director of Healthcare the following day. This was 2022. Her last trip was in August of 2021 when she went to the Zambia. And she was put on medical leave after that because there was obviously something was wrong. Nobody knew what it was. The image, I just mentioned that. I began doing some research and found that the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland was doing research trials with patients. I contacted them and they arranged an interview with Michelle. She qualified for their study and they flew us to the NIH on September 11th, 2022. And that's all free. It's they flew us there, they picked us up at the airport, took us to a nice hotel, shuttled us back from the hotel to the NIH, and fed us there, and all the treatment was free. She had 4 days of extensive testing. Her diagnosis of frontal temporal disorder, FTD, was confirmed, and on September 15th, we arrived the 11th, and then September 15th, she was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. This is a degenerative disease of the musculoskeletal system for which there is no known cause or cure. Only 5% of patients who get FTD also get ALS. We never won anything, but here we get this, and have a 5% chance of that happening. So Michelle's disease continued to advance. She lost her ability to speak in July 2023. In October 2023, she lost her ability to swallow. So I'm sitting there at our island, and she's eating, and her airway obstructed. And so I was able to clear her airway. And for that, in the evening, then I pureed her food, and she was eating her food, and she obstructed again. And so I was able to clear her airway a second time, and I called our neurologist, and I said, "Look, I think Michelle needs a gastric tube." And he said, "Yeah, it sounds like it. If we just schedule it, it's going to take 3 weeks to get her in." And we didn't have 3 weeks. So he said, "Just bring her to the ER and we can put it in right away." So that's what happened. She was on a peg tube starting on right after that. And then in October, this was in July, in October she lost her ability to swallow. She gets the peg tube and she was placed on hospice at this time. And in November, she fell and fractured her ankle, which required surgical repair. And we were looking for answers. Maybe the orthopod came to me and says, "We can fix her ankle here, just get it back the way it was pretty much. She'll be in a cast for 6 months. He says, or we can just fuse it. And she'll just have to wear a brace for a month." I says, "Well, I think we just need to fuse it because I don't know if we'd be able to handle 6 months of a cast." We were looking for answers. We read everything we could find on death, dying, and living with a terminal illness. Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering by Timothy Keller. Where is God When It Hurts? Philip Yancey. A Place of Healing, Johnny Erickson Tata. Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade, Gary Chapman. A Promise Kept, Robert Wilkinson, and so many more. We just read everything we get our hands on. We read through the Psalms repeatedly. Ed Dobson, former pastor of Calvary Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, wrote a book on his experience when he was dying from ALS. And this is what he said: it's easy to believe that God will take care of you when you don't need to be taken care of. What am I learning from this experience? Okay, here's Michelle in Ukraine. Here she is in India. This was in the upper Amazon of Brazil. This was in Nepal after the earthquake. Sorry, I don't have any pictures of you in this here. This is Egypt, one of her 6 trips there. And this was the last family photo we had taken. This was in 2023. Okay. I think you can blank the screen, can't I? Maybe not. All right. Okay, what am I learning from this experience? First, I've observed that we are much better at dealing with death than we are with dying. This is okay. This is Michelle. This was Michelle's funeral here. She's buried in. We had a funeral in Columbus, and then we came up to Erie, and she was buried in Wintergreen Gorge Cemetery. And I did the funeral, and I don't know how the Lord gave me grace to get through that. And this is her gravestone. I was just there on Thursday with Michelle's aunt and uncle. They're back here. They came up here with me. I'm staying with them. And Michelle and I picked out this lot together and the gravestone. And I wanted to get one right by the road there where there's a water fountain and a trash can, because I want people to see this headstone. And here's what it says: and just as it is appointed for a man to die once, and after that comes judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. So I can be annoying people even after I'm gone. So they come over here to get the water, and they'll get to see that. So this was a testimony. Okay. So what am I learning? Through grief, pain, and loss. First thing I just said is we're better at dealing with death than we are at dying. Let me explain that. When someone dies, you can send flowers, go to the funeral, pay your respects, and go home. Dying is a lot more complicated. It's very uncomfortable. It's dissociating. People don't know what to say. They're afraid I'm going to say something stupid or something offensive, so they don't say anything. Family and friends disappear. This absence increases the sense of pain and loss for the one who's dying. It's too threatening to stare death in the face. Our theology prepares us for dying. We have a theology of death. We don't have a theology of dying. In many ways, we're pagan in the way we deal with dying. We just don't want anything that we want to avoid it. People have, Michelle, some of her kindred spirits, they just disappeared because, when they had this deep, intimate relationship with her, and then when they come, that's gone. And they just can't handle that. Michelle and our daughter were best friends, and that just devastated our daughter. When Michelle died, she was in home. She was able to. She was aware of person, place, event, time, right up until she died. She was able to walk right up until the time she died. So she proved the neurologist wrong. They said all these things are going to happen, but they didn't happen the way because every patient's different. And so as things progressed, she could walk, but she couldn't walk very far. And when she was walking, I'd have to be with her because if she stumbled, she'd fall. So then, I would just put her in a wheelchair when we would go for a walk. And so one day I said, do you want to go for a walk? This was July 12th of last year. And she goes, yeah, I want to go for a walk. Well, she couldn't tell me that because she wasn't able to speak then, but we used images and icons and stuff she could point to, or thumb yes, no. And so I was giving her feedings, and so 3 times a day. And so I gave her a feeding like I always did. And before I ever gave her a feeding, I always aspirated to make sure there was nothing in her stomach so she didn't get too much volume in her stomach. And so then she gave her feeding, got her up into her chair. This was July. In October of 2024, she went on oxygen. And so I got the oxygen set. We're all ready to go. And she vomited. And I had the suction machine right there. So I grabbed the suction, I suctioned her, and then she bit down on the suction tube. I'm giving you more information than you want, but I just want to get you to visualize this. And I started yelling at her, open your mouth. So she opened her mouth, and I pulled the suction out, and when I went to put her back in, her teeth were clenched, and she wouldn't open her mouth. And so I'm screaming at her, open your mouth. And when she finally opened her mouth, she had aspirated everything that was in her mouth. And I said, good night. I said, do you want to die? And we had yes-no questions, cards, and she pointed to no. I had talked to her neurologist before that when we went, and I said, she's not following directions. Sometimes I'll tell you, she just doesn't do it. And he said, this is the FTD, he said, because she's sending a message to her muscles, and it's just not getting there. She's trying to do it, but she can't. So I'm yelling at her to open her mouth, and she's trying, it just doesn't happen. So I called the hospice up. They sent a nurse out. Her lungs were clear. This was a Saturday. Sunday, that her lungs were junky, and she went downhill kind of quickly after that. So on Tuesday, she breathed her last breath. And, her heart rate got up to 150. She was breathing 50 times a minute. She just wasn't able to exchange the oxygen. You can only sustain that for so long. My daughter there's a reason I'm telling you all this. My daughter was standing right there at her bedside. And as she was going from breathing at 50 times a minute to slower and slower, and it was kind of ugly at the end, because then she's gasping for air, and then she stops breathing, and she starts breathing again, and she died. And my daughter standing there watching that, she'd never seen anybody die before, and not much like that, and it really traumatized her. People would say stupid things. I was talking to a pastor and one of our supporting churches, and he said, well, maybe the next time I see you, Michelle was sick, he knew that. And he said, maybe the next time I see you, you'll have a new bride on your arm. And I said, why don't you go tell your wife what you just said to me? People would say things like this, but that's why people don't want to say anything. They're afraid they'll say something like that. They want to say something. And, just how do you deal with that? Her sister, they were just a year apart. And her sister she lives 45 miles away, and she just wouldn't come. And, when that happens, how do you deal with that? You can get angry, and spiteful, you just got to forgive people, let it go, or it's just going to tear you up. And I say that because I'm saying as a church, not this church, the church in general, we have a theology of death, but we don't have a theology of dying. We don't know how to deal with this. We don't do well with it. The first thing, that's what I've learned, is we're better at dealing with death than dying. Secondly, affliction, pain, and suffering can make a person narcissistic, self-absorbed. I saw this happening to me. Terminal illnesses are consuming. It consumes your time, your thoughts, your emotions, your activities. Everything has to be planned around circumstances created by the disease. When it has when it has such a prominent place in your life, you think that others should be attentive or concerned. It should have some prominence in their life. A close friend of me called me up on the phone to talk to me about his aunt and uncle, who had a similar struggle to the one that Michelle was encountering. And he talked to me for 45 minutes and never referenced Michelle. I didn't want to hear about his aunt and uncle. I'm absorbed with my own pain. A month later, he called again. I saw his number on the phone, and I chose not to answer it. And then he called again a little bit later. And I was kind of convicted about my attitude, so I answered. And he wanted to talk to me about his ministry and wanted some advice, and we talked for an hour. I was able to encourage him and give him some recommendations that would help him. He was appreciative, but he never asked me anything about Michelle. I can't expect other people to carry my cross. We can still serve others from a position of loss and suffering. I need to care for others and have a ministry to them and not expect the conversation should resolve around me and Michelle. You know, that's the thing that helped me more than anything else, is being involved in the lives of other people when I was going through this. So we're done at 10:30, right? Somebody tell me yes. Okay. We were members of a large church over in Worthington, Ohio, and I think it's like 900 people there, and they got a big foyer, and they got a handicap bathroom right there. So I would take Michelle, because at the end of the service we had an ABF, you know, an adult Bible fellowship we went to, and so I needed to get her into the bathroom to give her a feeding, and sometimes to get her changed, and so I'd be in there for a little while. And so somebody's knocking on the door because they want to get in there. And I says, okay, just give me a couple minutes. I'll be right with you. And there's another couple. She's in a wheelchair. She doesn't have any cognitive issues, but you know, he wanted to get her to the bathroom too. And so when I came out of the bathroom, the man's standing there and he's angry with me. And he said, that bathroom is for disabled people. I said, I know, my wife is disabled. He says, well, my wife needs to use it. I says, okay, it's open for you. And so she was sitting in a wheelchair. She wheeled over to me and she reached out and she just grabbed my arm like this. She just, bam, really hard. And she wouldn't let go. And because she was angry, you know, I'm thinking, and Michelle's walking away and I needed to catch up with her because, you know, I didn't want her walking out, so I didn't know where she was going. And so I just pushed her arm off of me like this so I can catch up to Michelle, and she screams. And so her husband's mad at me now because he feels like I assaulted his wife. And all these people are standing around in the foyer talking, you know. And so I took off, I caught up with Michelle, and one of the pastors came up to me because he saw it. And he says, hey, I'm so sorry. I says, no, this is exactly what I'm talking about, is we become self-absorbed with our affliction. I understand that. Their whole life is this. And that's our whole life was this. You know, and you want other people to accommodate you and make space for you. And third, what do I got here? I've learned what Ephesians 5:25 means. Husband, love your wives like Christ loved the church. I've always thought this meant to show my love by being faithful to Michelle, honoring her, deferring to her, being a gentleman, encouraging and supporting her in ministry. You know, so we say, what do you want to do tonight? This is before she got sick. Oh, let's watch a movie. So we sit down and he says, what do you want to watch? And I says, I don't know. Well, what do you want to watch? She goes, I don't know. So we went about watching anything because we were busy deferring to each other. You know, I said, okay, fine. That doesn't always work. Huh? All right. So it's not just about being a gentleman, encouraging, supporting. It's so much more than that. Christ loved the church and went to the cross for her. He paid the ultimate sacrifice. His love is not reciprocal. We can't love Christ the way he loves us. There is no service, obedience, gift, or sacrifice that we could make that would reciprocate in kind the love that God and Christ has for us. He doesn't need our love, but it's amazing that he wants it. This is where the lights came on for me. Michelle got to the point in her disease where she couldn't reciprocate my love. She wasn't able to speak or verbalize her love to me. She was in an increasing role of dependence. I would take hold of Michelle close and look her in the eyes and say, I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I promised you that when we got married, I would be with you for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death do us part. I'm here to stay. I'm taking care of you, and it's not a burden. I love caring for you. It's my privilege. She would respond by weeping. Christ loves me, even though my love for him is not reciprocal. That's how he wanted me to love Michelle. And finally, I'm learning what it means to lament. Lament is the honest cry of a hurting heart, wrestling with the paradox of pain and a promise of God's goodness. Affliction, loss, and dying are where faith meets life. The greatest opportunities for growth come through times of the greatest affliction. And it all depends upon how we respond to that affliction, how we respond to the person that doesn't show up. And Michelle said to me, she mentions people's names. I said, are you sad? She said, yes. I said, why? And she mentioned, because they don't come to see me. She wanted to see these people because she knew she was dying. One thing Michelle said to me once, we're sitting on the couch, and when she was still verbal, she looked at me and she said, are you going to remarry? I just started crying. I mean, that was the last thing I was thinking about. But, it's something she was thinking about. Okay, affliction, loss, and dying, or faith meets life. When we face affliction and loss at multiple levels, physically, mentally, professionally, relationally, the Lord doesn't answer our prayers, how are we going to respond? I was praying for him to heal her. A third of the Psalms are laments. I've read through the Psalms dozens of times over the years. I'm reading through them again now. But now they are resonating with me in a way that they never have before. The reason for this is that we learn through our brokenness what we can never learn through our wholeness. Sorrow and grief and pain and affliction are such tremendous opportunities to know God better and to move forward or to move backward. There are 3 steps in lament. Complaining, actually there's 4 of them. I got them up here, don't I? Complaining, requesting, trusting, and praising. Complaining, requesting, trusting, and praising. Lament begins by turning to God and offering a complaint. David cries out in complaint in Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Jesus quoted this verse in his cry of dereliction from the cross, but the Father gave him no answer. Michelle had been so faithful, serving sacrificially with a ministry that was a dynamic change maker. She was stricken at the height of her ministry. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. Jesus tells us in his Sermon on the Mount, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and to the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks will be opened. Or which one of you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? This is Jesus talking in the Sermon on the Mount. I feel that God gave me a stone and he gave Michelle a servant. I wouldn't will this tragedy on my children. This is cruel. This is my complaint and lament, and it's legitimate. It's legitimate to complain and lament, but lament doesn't begin and end with complaint. If it does, we become despondent and depressed. What happens so often is we get to this point and we don't move forward. I participated in Grief Share in a local church shortly after Michelle died, and there was like 15 people in there, and I was the only guy. And I thought, hey, are any women dying or just men dying? I mean, where's all the men here, As men and women grieve a little differently. But one woman in there said, she said, my husband died 2 years ago. And I still can't get out of bed in the morning. I thought, wow. I went to the leader afterwards and says, this woman is not, she's not just grieving, she's clinically depressed. And she needs something more than Grief Share. And it's the problem, we can get stuck in this whole process and not be able to move forward. Our lament needs to move from complaint to request. Notice how Jesus does this when he's praying in the Garden of Eden before his arrest. He knows from the time that he began his ministry that the purpose of his life was to die for the sins of the world. He had predicted his death multiple times. Now he was praying moments before his rest, and 3 times he asked the Father if it be possible that this cup pass from me. Okay. He knew that's why he was here. He is struggling with the imminent reality of his impending suffering and loss. If Jesus struggled with the Father's will, can't we? Bring your requests. The third step in lament is praise, trusting in praise. There's a wonderful example of lament in John 11 and the death of Lazarus. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were probably the closest friends that Jesus had. He stayed in their home on numerous occasions, and they knew him well. Jesus had healed people all over Palestine. He had seemingly eradicated disease in many places. The multitudes came to him and he healed them all. It says all of them. Nobody went away sick. Most of the people he healed didn't know Jesus, and Jesus didn't know them in any social setting. He healed people who didn't believe in him. He healed people from a distance that he never met. He healed people who hated him. Certainly, he would heal one of his friends who believed in him upon their request of Martha and Mary, but Jesus deliberately leaves Lazarus to suffer and die. Wow. Jesus shows up 4 days after Lazarus had been buried. Talk about not showing up for somebody who's sick and dying. Jesus didn't. Martha went out to meet Jesus as he was approaching their village and said to him, Lord, I think she said it like this, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. When Jesus arrives at the house, Mary's complaint is exactly the same as her sister's. Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. The fact that their complaints are word for word indicates they had rehearsed this together multiple times. They had said this to one another. Where's Jesus? He can heal Lazarus. Why doesn't he come? But notice Martha and Mary don't stop with complaint. Here's their complaint, okay? Why weren't you here? Martha moves on to request and trust when she says to Jesus, but even now, I know that whatever you ask, God will give you. She doesn't even know what she's asking for when she says that. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God who is to come into the world. She's asking Jesus to do something even though she doesn't know what it is he will do. But her trust in him is unwavering, even in the depths of her sorrow, disappointment, and confusion. The path of lament is complaint, request, and trust that leads to praise. That's another thing that has helped me so much, is just being involved in corporate worship. So I'm involved in 2 churches right now. One church, the Church of 900, is doing a revitalization work of a church that's just a mile and a half from my house. It got down to about 15 people. They got a beautiful building on a nice location, 10 acres of land, and so I'm involved in that church as well. So I go to the early church at 8:15 in the morning, and then I go across town to the ones near me. I get there at 10:15. So I'm serving on both of the mission boards there and helping them with that and teaching. And anyway, the big church has amazing music, So I get there about, just like I did today, about 15 minutes or 20 minutes before they start, and they're practicing, just like we're there. So I'm sitting there, and I'm just taking the opportunity to get some extra praise in. It just makes so much difference in the whole process of lament. And that's where you need to wind up. Complaint, request, trust that leads to praise. But this doesn't necessarily provide an answer. Martha and Mary were given an answer, but Job never was. What is the answer to this experience of affliction and loss that seems so cruel and without purpose? Isaiah 55 helps me to understand when God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. I don't understand because I can't understand. This is what Paul tells us when he became overwhelmed with the person of God and explained, the depths of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Or who has given a gift to him that he should be repaid? For from him and to him and through him are all things. To him be glory forever. Amen. I rest in the statement that appears at the end of the 11th chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, even after I've been fully known. I don't have an answer. Okay. I don't have an answer to why the Lord had chosen for my wife to suffer so much, but one day I will. This is where faith touches life. Even though we don't understand, we have hope. Job, Jesus, Martha, and Mary all placed their confidence in the God of the resurrection. This isn't just a consolation for the life you never had, but a restoration of the life you always wanted. This means that every horrible thing that ever happened will not only be undone and repaired, but will in some way make the eventual glory and joy even greater. The Lord will make all things new. I want to say a hospice. When Michelle's in hospice, nurses came in. We had a masseuse, we had a music therapist, we had a social worker, we had an unsaved chaplain come to see her, we had nurses and aides come in. I shared the gospel with every one of those poor folks. And two of her nurses I led to the Lord and discipled them, and they both gave testimonies at her funeral. And so that was part of it. At the funeral in Erie, we'd had a funeral in Campbell to Erie. Michelle's niece, Paul and Belba's niece also, came up to me during, we were having a meal there, and she said, I think she's like 30, she's got a 10-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter always asks me questions about God and the Bible. I said, I don't know anything. And I said, well, do you want to have a Bible study? This was August of last year, 1 year ago. I said, do you want to do a Bible study with me? She goes, yes. So we started a Bible study in August. Every Friday during her lunch hour from work, she calls me up and we talk. So I gave her some things to, 10 questions to have these sheets on faith and repentance and salvation and have her just work through and answer the questions, just like a couple words. We went through all of those, and it took several weeks. And then, long story short, November, she came to faith in Christ. Then we started discipleship, and so we've been doing that every Friday. I was up to Erie in May, and I met with her and her husband, and she has shared her testimony with her mother, with her two sisters, and her husband's an unbeliever. And so we sat down for a meal, and I started talking to him, and he's kind of an agnostic, and he said to me, I said to him, do you know for sure you're going to heaven? He goes, well, I don't know, probably we'll find out. I said, what would you say to God if you're standing before him? He says, we'd work it out. And I says, you don't really know. And it says, you don't believe, but you don't have a good reason not to believe. You don't know what it is that you don't believe. I want to give you the opportunity to find out what it is you don't believe so that you can have a good reason not to believe. And so I'm meeting with them tomorrow before I go back to Columbus. And I asked him after we left, I kept it short, because we were having a meal together and I don't want to beat him, but I just got introduced. His name is Ryan. I'd like to ask you to pray for him. And I said, can I contact you? Can you give me his email address? And so I said, hey, I'd like to do the same thing with you that I did with Molly. And he's a police officer. He says, man, I'm really busy. And when things settle down a little bit, we could probably do that. And I wrote back, your life's not going to get easier. It's going to get more complicated. And he said to me, I'm so thankful for what you've done for my wife. Wow. So the door's open there. And I got a plan. He's a police officer, and so I'm going to work him over tomorrow. I'm going to give him that sheet. And the sheet, you're supposed to look up your Bible. I got all the verses printed right there on the sheet. I says, I know you cops sit on the side of the road and oftentimes do nothing. You're just sitting there taking a break. You can do this. Answer 2 questions. So we'll see what happens. I want to mention that when Michelle was dying, I've written poems to her, for her whole married life. And I thought, I want to assemble these things. And so I went looking for them, and they were in cards. I had some in my computer, and I took the poems from the last 21 years, and I put them in this book, and I published it. And it starts with 2005 and goes up through 2025. And I published it, and then I would read these to her every night, several of the poems. And there's stories behind all these poems that people wouldn't know unless they knew. And so I would stop and say, "Do you remember this?" And I'd tell her what was behind it, and she would smile, or after a while she couldn't smile, but she would give me a thumbs up. And I decided I wanted to make this public. These are all written for the purposes just for Michelle. It's not a book about marriage; it's a book about love and marriage. And I just wanted to do this to honor her. And there's 105 poems in here, and they're listed by year. And there's a picture in between each one. When she died, I republished it with the poems I had written to her when she was sick, and I put an epilogue in there also. If anybody's interested in it, it's here. It's on Amazon. It's $17 on Amazon. I can get it for $12. So if you want one, you can have it for $50. No, you can have it for $12 each. Okay. I think we can have 2 minutes, 3 minutes. You tell me if there's anything, if this resonates with anything that's going on in your life. It isn't, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for empathy. I'm looking for, I want to say, I want this to speak to other people too. This isn't just, we're all here, okay? There's all this pain in this room right now that's covered. We don't put it out there, but we need to. Anybody want to make any comments?
So what do you recommend is the best thing to do in the process of dying? What should people do?
Be present. Just showing up. People think, well, I got to say something. You don't need to say anything. There may be occasion to say something, but there's a gal, she was in our wedding. Michelle and I were married for 48 and a half years. Michelle had led this gal to the Lord. They grew up together. And she was in our wedding, and she went through nursing school with us, and we never saw her again. And May of last year, she was driving through. She contacted me. She said, "Can I stop and see you?" Wow. She showed up just before, 2 months before Michelle died. Gal, who was her best friend. And she didn't say anything. She just sat there, and Michelle saw her. Pray with them, Okay, I think, anybody else comments? All right, I think there's still some donuts left if you want to. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for your goodness to us, Lord. You're good to us, even in the worst of times. Lord, we can trust you even when we don't understand. I pray, Heavenly Father, that you would give all of us the grace to face the afflictions, the loss, the pain, the suffering that comes in inevitably to all of our lives. And Lord, that you would use us to draw us even closer to you. I know, Lord, that what happened to Michelle is not the end. It's not even the beginning. There is so much more to come. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.